G'day everyone, this is Jackson Millan, the Wealth Mentor.
And Sam Panetta. Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Ask Aureus Anything.
It's good to have another episode. I forget which episode.
Number 7.
Number 7.
Episode 7.
Lucky number 7. So we're here to answer your questions. Once again, we seem to be getting a lot of questions offline, which is great. Seems to be a lot of you getting a lot of value out of this segment. So we're glad to keep running it, and hopefully those of you who jump on can participate and post up your questions as we go.
Look, it's the end of February. It is the end of summer. I hope you guys are kicking some goals that you've set out to kick this year. We're trying our best to kick our own goals. We're the Wealth Mentor community. This week we've added 81 new members. We're up to 819 now in our little community. So we hope we're adding value to you guys, and you're getting some sort of efforts or some sort of value out of our efforts, and we can keep helping you guys out.
Yeah, so very exciting. It's great. Got great momentum considering that we've been in business 9 weeks now.
8 weeks.
8 weeks.
8 weeks.
So pretty exciting. So as a bit of an update, we've got some upcoming workshops. We've got some really good feedback from our last full day workshop. As we spoke about last time, that was kind of our first one that we were doing complimentary, but we will be running some evening workshops over the coming weeks to accommodate more so for people who want to get some quick insights, some quick tips in business and in life, and hopefully get some clear direction. So our next workshop is going to be on Tuesday, the 13th of March from 6 till 8 at our Brookvale office. And we'll be shortly announcing another workshop, which is going to be in the city, which is going to be towards the end of March. I believe we're probably thinking around the 27th. So we'll keep you up to date with that. Further to that, we're also in the final stages of launching our first online course, which is very exciting. As we've mentioned before, we've been working really hard to develop an industry-first e-learning platform for wealth and finance to help people really demystify the language of money and start kicking some serious goals when it comes to building wealth for the future. So we will be doing a bit of a launch on that over the coming weeks, and we'll actually be giving some free memberships out to the community to get some people in there and hopefully add some value. So that's a good segue. We're going to be launching a new weekly giveaway for the community. So we're going to do a draw generally on a Monday, looking at the previous week to see who is the best contributor of either value or questions or content to the community. And we're going to be giving away various things. We'll kind of change it up as we go. So a bit of congratulations to Roz and Mark, who received some gold class movie tickets this week, just for their ongoing contribution in terms of feedback to us in the business. And we really value that feedback, so we figured we'd give them a nice night out. So make sure you enjoy it.
Not bad, not bad.
Alrighty, so let's dive right in.
Before we get stuck into it, I need to interject general advice, warning, bit of legal jargon. This is not specific tailored advice to you guys. Before you go out and action anything that we talk about today, make sure you seek out a professional and you get specific tailored advice to your situation.
And make sure they've got a beard as well.
2 beards.
2 beards. All right, so let's dive in. Those of you who are watching, any question, doesn't matter how trivial, how silly you think it is, post it up. I'm sure there's plenty of other people, 819 to be exact, that probably have the same question, just don't have the guts to ask it. So feel free to post it up and we'll answer it today. But we have had some questions that are coming through the week, so we'll cover those off. So this is a good one. So you recently released your first book. How did you get started? And more importantly, how did you get it finished? This is a really good question. So the book was launched about 6 weeks ago, I think. We did a soft launch. My publishing company's now done the official launch this week, and we're looking to go to print in a couple of weeks' time, which is very exciting. They've also advised that we're on the track to becoming an international bestseller, which is pretty surreal. I didn't think that was going to happen, but in any case, great things. I thought about writing a book for a long time. I never really thought about what I should write about, and it was actually a structure that I adopted from a business thought leader by the name of Jack Delosa, who created a formula to write a book in a week. So I covered this, I think it was on a previous Q&A, that Jack basically locked himself in a room with no technology other than his laptop, with no Wi-Fi connected, in some like random forest somewhere for like a week. And he just smashed out his book in a week, which was a very good book, and it became a bestseller in Australia as well. Now, Jack said that the whole idea of writing a book is having a plan. And this kind of goes for anything in life. Without a plan, how do you know what to do? So he kind of pulled up an Excel spreadsheet and broke down his book into really, really simple steps. And what it allowed him to do is to get really clear on what he was trying to achieve, who he was talking to, all of the outcomes that he wanted to talk about in his book, and then break those outcomes into basically action items and steps. And through going through this formula, he was able to break it down into a series of chapters and basically paragraphs and subjects within his book that he could talk to in a very systematic way. So that allowed him, the hard part is doing the structure, and I did exactly the same thing. I spent about a week whilst I was in Brazil doing the structure. I wasn't locked in a room, I had internet, I was doing all right. And I nutted out the structure. Once I had the structure, then I just really filled in the gaps. I took that structure, I put it into a Word document, and I had basically everything that I wanted to say and all the points that I wanted to make. And then I went through and thought about, well, what stories of my life will relate to this subject that I'm talking about that will allow people to draw the connection between the theory, which a lot of people tend to either misconstrue or not understand because it's hard to put it into context, and my life experience that brings it all together. And that's been, I guess, one of the most powerful things as part of the book that I've been told by those who have read it, is that connection makes it really, really easy for people to understand what the theory actually means in a real life application. So that probably took me the longest amount of time. And then I proceeded to write the book over about 8 weeks. So I finished half of it whilst I was in Brazil, the rest just kind of knocking it out little by little of an evening. And then it took me another 4 weeks to get a publishing deal. And then it was a matter of just going with their publishing schedule of when they wanted to launch the book, which was January this year. They wanted to kind of use the momentum of people having new financial year regrets or resolutions, depending on whether they'd broken their resolutions yet, and utilise the book as momentum to hopefully help them kick some goals. So that was how I went about it. I have to say there is such thing as a writer's block. You hit a wall about halfway, and you just go, shit, this is hard work. I'm only halfway, and it's taken me this long to get here. And I did look at ways of procrastinating to try and get out of it, but I persevered, I pushed through it, I got it done.
I think it's important to write a book. I think it adds a lot of value. I think it adds a lot of value to the writer and the readers, you know. I read a lot, right? And I think you can gain a lot of education that you don't really typically get through the school system by reading people's books. And I also think on the flip side of it, the person who writes the book learns a lot, and it's also excellent for business. There's a theory called the key person of influence, and essentially writing a book demonstrates to people that you actually know the subject topic that you're talking about. So it's a powerful thing on both ends, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone has a book in them. It's just a matter of whether they have the ability to finish it. And having this structure is something that is going to make it a lot easier for you to get your book finished. If any of you are interested in becoming an author, writing your first book, or even if you are or have already written a book and haven't finished it, or looking to write another but go an easier route, I'm happy to share my process and how I went about it, and hopefully give you a bit of a head start.
Cool. All right, excellent stuff. So here's a question I got from some of our new clients this week. They've said, my wife and I want to buy our first home in Australia. However, we only moved here a couple of years ago from South Africa. Is it still possible to get a home loan? So I guess the only real difference is exceptional to the normal rules is, are you guys citizens or permanent residents? So are you got your correct status in the country where you're allowed to borrow and own a home and live here and reside here for the foreseeable future? Assuming that you are and you have that status, you're a permanent resident, then only the normal lending rules will apply to you. So assuming that you've saved up a substantial deposit and assuming that you've got the cash flow to be able to afford to repay the loan, then there's no reason that you can't get a home loan to buy a home in Australia, even if you've only been here for a few years. It's a common thing. We get it a lot. We get a lot of expats, a lot of British, a lot of South Africans, and it's it's as long as you meet those rules and you're here for the long term, you can get a home loan and buy a house.
Yeah, I think that given there's a lot of conversation in the media, I think a lot of people believe that the government doesn't like expats or kind of migrants here to buy property, or it has to be new property, and that only applies if you're not a permanent resident. There are very strict rules in which if you are an overseas investor looking to buy property in Australia, there are restrictions in place from both borrowing and ownership that will ultimately dictate whether or not you can acquire a certain asset. But if you're a permanent resident, you're staying here permanently, then there's no problem.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of it in the media. You know, there's a lot of stuff about the speculation about Chinese investors buying all the property, and they've sort of really cut down on that. There was a bit of a push from the lender's perspective there because they went through it, and there was a large portion of these overseas loans for these off-the-plan investment properties in Australia that were, heavily falsified. They're companies that were created just to get the loans and pay slips that were all made up. And you need to think that's all in different languages, so they get a translator involved, and it's very easy to pull the wool over the bank's eyes. And they've sort of all but clamped down on it, so it's essentially extinct now. But for those that aren't, doing those sorts of things that are actually here for the long term, buying their home, you shouldn't have any problem.
Cool.
All
right. So this is a question we get a lot. I'm a small business owner and I'm having cash flow issues in my business. What should I do? Now, typically this happens in a couple of instances. Typically, a small business is going through growth phase, goes from being a kind of technician or a kind of an owner-operator where they're the ones that are doing all the work, to taking on staff, and they really overextend themselves. Or alternatively, they have an established business and the environment changes, there's something that occurs, and therefore it becomes more difficult to do the same old things that you've always done, and therefore that has a dramatic impact to your bottom line. And for example, you've got a key account and you lose that key account, then there's issues there. The first thing is going to be about understanding your typical cash flow and about ideally working towards having an emergency fund. If you haven't got an emergency fund yet and you haven't run into cash flow issues, this should be an immediate priority for you. An idea of an emergency fund is about understanding if the worst was to happen, how are you going to continue to survive, either through the cash that you have available on hand or through the use of debt, whether it be an overdraft or something like that. Ideally, it would be great for you to use your own money. And for how long is that going to last you to allow you to steer your business back in the right direction? If you're already experiencing the cash flow issues, depending on how severe they are, it's about really hemorrhaging that loss. It's macroeconomics 101. Where you can't turn a profit, you need to minimize your expenses in order to essentially minimize the impact of the losses. So it's about really having that hard review of your business to see what of your costs, whether it be variable or fixed costs, have to go and that you can afford to let go. In a lot of cases, that has to be in the form of letting staff go. Particularly if you're in a service business where you've got really high salary staff members, high value staff members. If they're not contributing value to your business and they're not contributing to being able to get you out of the hole, then they need to go. So typically your non-income producing staff members would be the first ones to consider. Or if you do have dead weight in your kind of income producing staff, that they aren't producing a return on investment and there's no kind of light at the end of the tunnel, then that would be the best way to go. Create efficiencies through your utilities, your memberships, your consulting arrangements, your accounting relationships, whatever you have to do, all of it can be negotiated. And further to that, it's about understanding a plan to get yourself back in the black, trying to get a profit margin, trying to get back into surplus, where then you can start focusing on building an emergency fund and building contingencies that are going to protect you from the next time, if it ever happens. Hopefully not. But typically, cash flow issues come from growing too fast or not adapting to the environment. So it's really, really important to be conscious of not only the internal factors in your business, but also the external factors. You can do this by utilizing some sort of a balanced scorecard approach to measuring performance in your business, whether it be having a KPI dashboard, doing external market analysis to see what your competitors are doing. If you can see that your competitors are drastically changing tact in regards to how they're pursuing their core business, or looking to diversify aggressively into a new area, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to follow suit, but you need to ask yourself why. So it's all of these things. It's about keeping your finger on the pulse. I would say that every single business needs to have a KPI dashboard where you utilize Fathom HQ, which syncs into Xero, and it not only tracks the financial data, like, for example, income, expenses, EBIT, profitability, revenue per full-time staff member, all of these key metrics, but it also allows us to have non-financial metrics, which we update on a regular basis and gives us the ability to report against them. So this is something that Sam and I do all of the time to ensure that we don't overextend ourselves or take anything for granted, which can get us in hot water.
Yeah, I find that cash flow, it becomes an issue sort of in two times of a business. When a business is struggling and they're hemorrhaging cash and they're dropping cash every single month, that's when most people pay attention to it and they go, oh, wow, we really need to do something about this. And that's, that's dangerous because you can go broke, the business can go under. But there's also comes a time where people want to grow their business and they blame being able to have the cash flow to implement the growth strategies. And they go, oh, you know what, I can't generate any more cash flow, so I can't grow the business, so I'll just continue doing the same thing over and over again. That's deadly for a business. So what you should be doing in that situation is sort of asking yourself, okay, how can I generate this cash flow, or how can I get other cash in the bank, or debt or finance or whatever it is, to be able to grow the business and then generate that cash flow. So I've got to work backwards a little bit. And most business owners don't. They get to the wall and go, yeah, this is about it and I'm done here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of business owners pay too much attention to their revenue and don't understand what their cost to serve is. If you don't have a good understanding of your break-even point in your business and what the relationship is between every dollar that you bring in and what it costs you to be able to deliver on that dollar of revenue, then you are really destined to fail or run a very inefficient business. And once again, this is stuff that we work with our clients on a regular basis, utilising our kind of virtual CFO offering, which ensures that they understand these things and what it means to their business, but also allowing them to effectively plan and control how their business continues to scale and grow.
Yeah, it's a deep river, this one, but it's very important.
Yeah.
All right. So next, this is something that I'm getting a lot lately. So I want to invest and grow my wealth. However, the banks won't lend me any more money to buy more property. What can I do to continue to get ahead? So look, it was a really easy bet for years, right? For the past 5 or 6 years, you just debt up as much as you can, buy some property in Sydney, and essentially we're going to make cash, right? And that was a very easy game that people played for 5 or 6 years. It's not the case anymore. Property markets have slowed down. In some areas, they're starting to go backwards. Lending is tough. It's tough as it's ever been. So unless you're a pretty strong borrower, you're not going to get the amount of money that you want. And people are essentially sitting on their hands because the residential property play has been such an easy way to grow their wealth that they don't know other ways of growing it. But there is other ways of growing it. And typically there's 3 pillars that people can utilize to grow their wealth. There's property, there's real estate, there's shares or managed funds, and there's business, all right? So if you can't grow any more wealth out of property, you can't get it, because property is a finance game. The more finance you can get, the more property you can buy, and the more money you can make out of it. So let's assume that you can't get any more cash out of the banks. What can you do? Well, you can do one of other 2 things. You can contribute your surplus to managed funds or shares or other growth investments like that and accumulate slowly over time. Or you can focus on growing your business. if you're not in business, you need to focus on your career. And those two things, your business or your career, is something that's been overlooked for years. It's tough. It's hard. You might need to study. You might need to get a business coach. You might need to, change tact a little bit, change strategies. But that's going to be your main driver moving forward for the next couple of years to be able to grow your wealth. And then on the flip side, if you're using your career, you're really going hard in your career, or you're really supercharging the business, you'll find that extra income that you're producing, either through profits or through a bigger salary, is then going to allow the banks to lend you more money. So you can go back into the property market, or you can go back into start buying more managed funds and shares and the like. So it's, what can you do? That's what you can do to get ahead.
And there's a few ways to go about it. Like, I was having a chat with one of my clients today, and Sam and I have been working with this client for a couple of months now. They're contractors making good money, and they wanted to buy a house on the Northern Beaches that's going to be worth circa 1.5 million. So what we basically typically do with a new client is we say, hey, this is what you can borrow currently. This is your current debt ceiling. With the current rules, this is how much the bank would be willing to lend you. And either it works, so yeah, perfect, thumbs up. You can go buy your house right now if you want to. Or no, sorry, it doesn't quite work, but this is how much additional that you would need to earn in order to be able to get enough debt using the current rules to be able to buy that property. So then what that allows us to do is that gives us purpose. That gives us a destination to work towards, because far too often people say, oh, I can't do it. Stuff it. I'm just going to go and spend all of that surplus. I'm just going to come and try it again later, without having a clear directional plan of what needs to do to actually get themselves there. So now we know their current situation. Now we've defined the destination. So all we've got to do is fill the gap. So now we've basically said, okay, you need to earn X dollars more per annum. And we're already talking about how they can drive that into their business and what type of things they can do to create that level of additional income, which is an active investment strategy. They're investing in themselves. They're investing in their business. And it's going to give them the ability to not only increase their earnings, which is going to also increase their ability to build wealth moving forwards, but it's also going to allow them to expedite the process of reaching that kind of dream home goal.
And this is why I love the Aureus model, right? This is why I love what we're doing, because it's typically, this is what would happen, right? You go to a mortgage broker, you say, I want to get a home loan to buy this property. The mortgage broker looks at it, he goes, this isn't a deal. I'm not going to make any commissions off this. He sends you packing, he sends you on your way, he goes, see you later, right? You're lost again. You talk to your accountant, your accountant's trying to minimize your tax and you're not showing any profit in your business, and then you go back to the broker and the broker still says, no, you can't get a home loan. The accountant goes, I saved you a couple grand on tax. Well, then you went and see your financial advisor, and your financial advisor goes, don't worry about buying your own home. I've got some good managed funds that you can invest in, and you should stick all your cash in here and contribute to this for the rest of your life. And whilst all great ideas, none of them achieved the goal of buying the circa $1.5 million home. So you need to take the holistic view of it and go, no, let's work on this. This might take 5 or 7 years, right, before a home loan's done. But let's go back and let's get this business cranking. Let's put some strategy around this. And this is what you need to do to hit target A and target B and target C. And when you get to target D, we'll go away and we'll get you your home loan, and you can go and you can buy your dream house. And that's what financial services should be about, is helping people to achieve their goals. And I'm ranting a little bit, but the industry is missing that. So
most people want to get one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So look at it holistically and challenge. If you get a no from anywhere, challenge why and what can I do to change it? Because there are things that are within your control that you can be doing actively to get you to your goals.
Especially if you're a business person.
Correct.
All right.
All right. So those of you watching, if you've got any questions, feel free to post them up. I'm more than happy to answer them. Doesn't matter how trivial. You can ask about anything. So we know that super is important. However, we don't know where to start. How can we make sure we're getting the most out of our super? Okay, good question. So this is something that I cover extensively in my book. I refer to this, and I work through this with all of my clients, which is called a bucket strategy. Very simply, every single person has 3 buckets in their life. They've got a short-term bucket, which is basically anything that is 12 months or less. They've got a medium-term bucket, which goes from 1 year all the way to age 60. And they've got a long-term bucket, which is from 60 plus. Now, the idea is about the game of life is about filling all of those buckets to the brim, living a life of abundance and being able to achieve everything that you want at every single stage of your life. But we need to understand that typically when we've earned money, we've got to tip it into one of those three buckets. So the long-term bucket is always going to be superannuation. And the reason why we say 60 is because that is the first age in which you can get access to your superannuation tax-free, assuming that you are no longer working. So the idea is that once money goes into superannuation, we cannot touch it until we turn 60. So although it is very tax effective, there is sometimes a very long waiting time that we have to endure before we can realise personal benefit. So typically how we work this is we want to tip money into the short-term bucket to ensure that we cover our lifestyle goals in the next 12 months. We then want to tip the surplus of that short-term bucket into our medium-term bucket, which is to cover all of our growth and generally financial freedom objectives between 1 year and age 60. And then anything in addition to that, we want to get into our long-term bucket. And typically there is a transitional process. And although it does in fact work out that you will pay more tax, it gives you the flexibility. And the idea is that by the time we get to retirement, we want to convert everything that we've got left in our short-term bucket or long-term, medium-term bucket outside of your home into super, wherever possible. Because that is the only way that we're going to have tax-free income for the rest of our lives. So how do you get the most out of your super? Understand what you're going to need in retirement. What type of lifestyle do you want? To give you some insights, and we've spoken about this before in the Q&A. If you're retiring at 65, and typically assuming that you've got your home paid off in full and your kids have flown the coop, you're going to need a comfortable lifestyle that's about $1,500 per week, or about 75 grand a year net of tax in today's dollars. So what that requires is about $1.3 million in today's money to be able to provide you with a lifestyle that you want in retirement for the rest of your life. If you wanted to retire at 60, that number is going to be closer to about 1.5 or 1.6 million. That gives you a bit of a ballpark. Now it's about understanding how your current superannuation balance is tracking. There are some projection tools that are available online on the Money Smart website. If you want to get access to some more customized and interactive projections, feel free to let us know. And it's about understanding if you just continue to contribute your 9.5% and with the investment growth that you've got on average, what is that going to provide you with? And then it's about addressing the gap. Are you going to start addressing it now and potentially compromise on, like that last example, buying your dream home? Or are you going to get your dream home first and then once you've got that down pat, start putting money into super? This is a balancing act and it's a big one. And it's very, very hard to objectively say, where should I be putting my money and in what bucket? It really depends on your goals. What I would advocate is that I've built a bucket strategy exercise as part of my book portal. If you have not bought the book already, you can get it for $1 on Amazon. And as part of the book, it'll give you access to a portal for free. It'll give you videos and walkthroughs about all of these different strategies and worksheets that you can work through in your own time, either by yourself or with your significant other or with your family, however you want to do it. And it'll help you work out how much you need in each of these buckets. So first thing, know where you are, know where you want to go, and then work out what you need to do to address the gap. It's as simple as that.
I think super is one of those things, that people either think it's too hard or it's too far away. But you have to pay attention to it because what's going to happen over time, inflation makes the cost of everything go up. And what's happened for the past 20 or 30 years is that the government hasn't increased the age pension in line with inflation. So essentially, the amount of pension that people get has gone up like this, but inflation has gone up like this, right? So in real terms, the quality of life that pensioners are living today is worse than it was 10 years ago, and it was worse than it was 10 years before that. So we can expect that to continue, that over time, inflation will increase at a larger rate than what the age pension does, and that in the future, pensioners will live a lower quality of life than what they're living today, and this will continue to happen. So it's more important than ever. It's more important than ever that you understand and you save and you super and you have a plan for having financial freedom when you retire.
Yeah, and the government just can't afford to fund everyone's retirement. And not only is it a subpar retirement, it's the date in which you can qualify for the age pension is continued to get pushed back. So by the time we get there, you're going to have to work until you're 85. What are you going to spend 3 years in retirement and fall off the perch and live on 19 grand a year in today's money? No. It's just make sure you understand what you need to live the lifestyle that you desire, and ensure that you can contribute even just a little bit as a salary sacrifice on a monthly basis, and it's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, very important stuff. All right, so this is actually something I had from an existing client that I've been a client of mine for years. They came and said to me, Sam, I want to buy an investment property, and I met with a property investment advisor. I am unsure whether to engage with them. Would you personally use a property buyer for your own properties? Yes, I would. So my last investment property that I bought it with the help of a property investment advisor. And the next property that I buy, I'm already talking to the property investment advisors. They're going to help me build the strategy around it and help me execute on it, find the property, do the negotiating. If I want to do a subdivision, or want to do a granny flat or something like that, they're going to help me with all the legwork there. To me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's like, if you're having a surgery, would you get a surgeon to do it? You probably would. I probably wouldn't buy another investment property without a property investment advisor. It's just too big a decision. What's the smallest bet you're going to make? 400 grand, upwards, you might buy 500 grand, $1 million property. What's 10 or 20 grand on a property investment advisor when you're making $500,000 bets that the property is going to work out?
Yeah, and I think this is the problem. I think a lot of people don't understand the value because they just look at the number of what the property investment advisor charges, and they don't look at it in respect to the investment decision that they're making. Like, okay, if someone was trying to charge you 10 grand to make a $50,000 investment, I would probably say that that'd be a bit sus. But we're talking about a $500,000 plus investment that is, if you make the right decision, that $10,000 can pay itself off in a couple of months. And conversely, if you make the wrong decision, it can be extremely costly at hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of the investment from either underperformance of what it could have done if you had a good investment, or even in costs from having bad tenants or being in the wrong area, or having repairs, things like that, structural repairs. We've heard a lot of horror stories around people who've bought property and been really badly burnt, because you've got to understand that you've got a physical asset that needs to be maintained. If you don't do this right, there are lots of ways that you can go wrong that can be really, really costly. So we advocate getting the right advice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people for years they were buying off the plan property and it was doing absolutely fine. The property market was going up, so typically you pay a little bit more for off the plan than what you would for an established home. It is brand new, I guess. It's new and shiny, and that's absolutely fine as long as the property market's going up. But we're seeing in lots of parts of Australia now where the off the plan markets are not going up, where property markets are going backwards. And if you're paying overs for an off the plan property and you go to settle it in 6 months' time, and you've made a 10 or 12% deposit or something even less than that, and the property market's gone backwards, you're not going to be able to settle on it. So you're in trouble from day one before you even own the property. So yeah, it pays to get advice around this sort of stuff.
Right. Thanks for your feedback, Matt. Hopefully you're enjoying it. If you've got any questions, mate, feel free to shoot them up.
Come on, Matt, throw us some questions. We're going to get Matt on the podcast.
Get Matt on the podcast. You're welcome on the podcast, Matt, anytime, mate. So this is another question I get all of the time, and this is typically for clients that haven't done work with us yet. They've kind of approached us and haven't had the kind of budget structure that we advocate put in place. So the question that I was asked is that I use my credit card and I love collecting the points. Is this a good strategy? And look, this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. I don't believe a credit card should be used for daily use or in regular circulation in the context of your cash flow. A credit card is an insurance policy, and it should be treated as such. And you've got to understand, why does the bank give you all of this stuff for free if in fact they are not making a substantial profit as a result? The bank is all about return on investment, and I'm not sure if you've seen the profits from the big banks last year, but it's astronomical. They pay their CEOs squillions. So they're probably off the back of most people who are utilizing credit cards, abusing it and trying to chase the points, and unfortunately incurring a lot of costs because they're either overspending or they're not paying it off every month. Now, the big rebuttal that I always get is, but Jackson, I pay off my card every month. And I go, well, great, that's fantastic. But do you know whether you are overspending? And this is the biggest risk. Typically, most people's credit card balances are in excess of their monthly cash flow or expenses. And therefore, what that means is there's a huge margin for error if they aren't really, really regimented in terms of what they're spending. Now, typically, we should be using our own cash for the purposes of running our budget, because that ensures that we have 100% transparency around what we are spending and we can put caps on it. Particularly when it comes to personal spending, there is absolutely no instance in which you should be using your credit card, points or otherwise, for personal spending. No coffees in the morning, no dinners out on the weekend, no beers with the boys, no boats or jet skis or whatever it is. No, never. Because those are the areas that you're most likely to overspend because they're discretionary. So the only time that we advocate using a credit card is for clients that have their budget structure down pat, 100%. That they still don't use it for anything that's discretional, and they use it for the things such as paying for bills that they have already saved the money for, and they can pay off the credit card with money that's already set aside. Booking flights overseas and booking accommodation and things like that they have already got money set aside for. And utilising it overseas for the purposes of cash flow protection, in the instance that their card gets skimmed, the bank will just cancel the card and essentially waive the costs. Whereas if you get your card skimmed on a debit card and the money's taken, it can take 6-8 weeks plus for you to get that money reimbursed. And once again, only utilise that for the limit that you plan to spend on that holiday for money that you already have set aside in cash. So you've got to have the budgeting structure in place. If you want access to our budgeting diagram and our methodology, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share it with you. I believe that everyone can maximize their surplus and still live a quality lifestyle, having everything that they want by having the right structure in place. Our motto is you live for today and you plan for tomorrow. And 80% of people overspend because they don't have the right structure. So getting rid of the credit card is the first step.
Yeah, this pisses me off a little bit because there's a very high correlation between someone's financial literacy levels being low and the amount that they lose on credit cards and things like that being high. So you find that people who don't understand the jargon, they don't get the money as well as someone who does, is the one who is losing the most out of these credit card deals because they don't really understand how much it's costing them. You would most commonly find people who cannot afford to be copying these hits on their credit card bills are the ones that are copying the hits on their credit card bills. So if you don't understand it fully, if you just like it because it's nice and shiny and you get some points, then you need to stay away from it because you're going to put yourself in a bad situation.
Yeah. Matt's asked a question. So business valuation for the purchase price of an investment, your thoughts as how much to pay? I'm not 100% sure of your question, Matt.
Look, it could be one of two things. I think you'll be asking the valuation on a business, if he's going to buy a business as an investment, or of if he's buying an investment property, should he have a valuation carried out on that property? So why don't I'll answer the property side of it. You can answer the business side of it. And hopefully, Matt, we've answered your question correctly. So if you're going to buy an investment property, should you have a valuation carried out on it? Yes, you should. Typically, most good property investment advisors actually have a background as valuers. That's sort of their formal training. So as part of their process, they should really do a valuation on the property to get a very close estimate of what the market value is. Typically, we'll find investors, unless they have a very good reason, they won't pay more than what the market value of the property is. If you're buying your home and you're using a little bit of help through a buyer's agent and the market value is 1 million, but you love the property so much and you want to pay 1,050,000, then that's an emotional decision. That's your home, that you can do that. But yes, if you're buying an investment property, you should have it valued because you don't want to pay overs for something that's supposed to be a financial decision.
Yeah. For the business aspect, there's a couple of considerations here. Depends on the type of business. There are some businesses that are goodwill businesses and cash flow businesses that can be very, very difficult to value. And what you find is that the valuation may not be always accurate, and it's very important that you take some of these valuations with a grain of salt. In a business such as a business that has an asset, has recurring revenue, and has methodologies that are commonly used as kind of multiples of recurring revenue or multiples of EBITDA, that gives you a very good insight as to what the underlying value of the business is. But once again, there are other aspects in which add value to a business. So if you are looking to acquire a business as an investment, I would say getting a valuation done is your first bet. Use a specialist valuer. We utilize a guy by the name of Brett Goodyear. Brett has been really seen as the number one in business valuations in Australia, and has had his valuations utilised in Supreme Court rulings. It is quite expensive exercise, but it is a very important part of your due diligence. I would not advocate getting a suburban accountant to do that on your behalf, because they typically kind of do a little bit of just guessing, and unfortunately it can be misguided. Further to that, it's about placing value on what the opportunity cost is within the business. Do you have the ability to apply your expertise, your knowledge to that business to get a substantial uplift on your return on investment? And therefore you may choose to pay a higher multiple or a higher price for that opportunity. Further to that, other things like systems, automations, the ability for key people in the business not to be having to be involved in the day-to-day operations, all add value. So it's very important that you weigh up all of these things. There are a number of due diligence consultants that can assist you, but it's also about just understanding how do you approach the negotiation, and do you have a plan? Given that when you're buying a business, as opposed to starting a business from scratch, you're essentially buying a head start. So you should have a robust business plan for any type of business that you're looking to go into. Of course, you wouldn't write a business plan for every type of business if it is different, but you should have an overall strategy in how you plan to apply your skill set to a business, what your ultimate objective is as part of acquiring that business, and how long are you planning to be able to have a return on investment for what you're putting in. Because you need to understand that is now your cost base, and it is your role in order to work to achieve an uplift on that capital to ensure that you can make back what you've contributed, and obviously achieve a profitable outcome if you choose to on-sell that business again. Further to that, it's also about whether you can pay yourself a market wage as soon as you step into that business too. That if you're unable to do that, then that obviously erodes the value. So there's lots of variables. I could talk all day about it. If you want to be introduced to the right people to assist you with that exercise, I'm more than happy to make some introductions. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, we've just waffled on for about 10 minutes. Hope you've learned a thing.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for the question. All right, so
look, get this all the time.
Yeah, look, we get this all the time. We get it from business owners, typically small business owners. They go, I want to save costs in my business. Should I be doing my own bookkeeping? No, you shouldn't be doing your own bookkeeping. Bookkeepers are a relatively good value for the amount of money you pay them and the sort of work they do. Typically, this comes from small business owners, sole traders, or very small companies. You need to think if you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, if you're a photographer, and then you want to go home at night and you want to spend 3 hours a night doing your bookkeeping every night, that's a very bad use of your time. You should be sticking to what you're good at. If it's wiring up houses, or out there videoing weddings, or whatever it is that your skill or your talent is, that's where your time should be spent. And from the revenue that you produce from your activities that you're really good at, you should be paying someone else who's really good at being a bookkeeper. I had this argument probably 2 or 3 years ago with a very close friend of mine, and he'd been in business for 4 or 5 years prior to us having this conversation. And he said, I do my own bookkeeping, blah, 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 blah. I carried on about it. I said, mate, pay you $100 a week and get a bookkeeper to do it. I said, it's a pretty simple business. You spend 10 hours a week doing this because you don't understand what you're doing. Pay someone to do it. It'll be the best decision that you've made so far in your business. And, a few years later, now he's going around telling people, he's saying to people, oh, you've got to get a bookkeeper. It was the best decision I ever made. It's just an absolute no-brainer to pay a bookkeeper to do bookkeeping.
Look, you should stick to what you know and outsource everything else. That's my motto. I couldn't think of anything worse than doing bookkeeping. And even our bookkeeper chases me for invoices and stuff. I go, just chase Sam, or as he's also known as Peter, the secretary. So he deals with all of that. I don't want to deal with it because I went through an exercise a number of years ago, and I wrote an ebook called Systemize Yourself to Success. And I developed an exercise that was about putting a dollar value on every single hour of your time. So let's say, for argument's sake, you pay yourself 150 grand a year. Divide that by the number of hours that you're working in a week across the entire year, let's say 48 weeks in a year, and work out what every single hour of your time is worth within the business. Now, if you can free and buy back that time, and time that you otherwise would have invested in bookkeeping, and say invest that into business development, or invest that into building a product that has recurring revenue in your business, or invest that in going to a networking event to get some more opportunities. And think about what return on investment you can get for that time of getting rid of the non-income producing aspects of your life, such as bookkeeping. Not only are you going to have a high likelihood of stuffing it up, but you're also going to have less time available for you to go and drive your business and do the things that you enjoy. There are only two tradable commodities in the world. There's time and there's money. You've got to work out which one's more valuable to you, and how much of your valuable time, which is the most valuable resource that we're never getting any more of, that you want to be investing in bookkeeping. I advocate getting an outsourced bookkeeper. Don't hire one internally, because obviously if you've got ebbs and flows in your business, you're paying someone to sit there and do nothing. Hire a contractor, somebody who's good at what they do for the time that they spend doing it. And ideally have your bookkeeper and your accountant in the same business, because it ensures that they can provide you valuable insights into your business and advisory services, particularly relating back to that cash flow question that we had before, that otherwise you might not get the insight into. Bookkeepers are technically not advisors. They're there to ensure that everything is reconciled and allocated correctly. So it's important that you've got a team working for you cohesively together to give you that full holistic picture.
It's a no-brainer. If you're in business, get a bookkeeper.
Do it. Get them.
Do it now.
Get all the bookkeepers.
All the bookkeepers.
All right. Is this my question?
Yes, you can answer this one.
My husband and I run a small business and we're keen to grow the business. Do you have any tips? I've got all the tips. First things first, get a business plan. And a business plan should consist of you having a 90-day action plan in your business every single 90 days to give you and your husband clear direction around what you need to be doing and why. We need to understand that as human beings, we are efficient creatures. We always make best use of the time that we have available. So unless we have a plan to work towards and we dedicate the time to working on our business, not constantly in it, it's not going to go anywhere. Further to that, I would firstly optimize your sales and marketing strategy. Now, if you say that you don't sell in your business, you're lying. Every business is selling something. We're all in the people business. We're selling things to people, and people are giving us money for it. So we need to identify how we have a sales process, how we do business, how we attract people into our business, and how do we add value for their investment. And then we need to refine it and continually improve it. Our internal onboarding process has probably gone through about 15 or 20 iterations. Now, we constantly try and improve it. How can we make it better? How can we get feedback? How can we ensure we get the right people in our business? How can we ensure that we add value? These are all the questions that you need to be constantly asking yourself. And also about having a robust marketing strategy, because if you are in business and you are just relying on referrals and things coming in outside of your control, you have absolutely no control over your business. We've seen clients that have had those similar strategies and the economy has turned or something has happened that has affected essentially their core business, and they have absolutely no way to fix it. So it's better off starting now and being able to have your marketing, and by all means, if you've got organic sources of income, fantastic, but don't have a reliance on them. Those would be really the key tips. Have a plan, have a marketing strategy, and have a sales process. And then continue to refine those three things and you'll be perfectly fine.
Get a coach if you're in business. It's Jackson and I always learning. We spent our weekend at a seminar this weekend in the city, learning all about business. We've done some big hours in there, and it's not everyone's cup of tea on a weekend. But if you're in business, it's like being an athlete. Do you know what I mean? If you want to grow, if you want to become better, you need to train. And most business owners haven't trained since they started their business. So if you want to get better, you need to educate yourself, you need to learn, and then you need to implement the strategies.
I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my education, on my business education. And it's not something that I'll continue to stop. As business continues to grow, it's something that we're going to continue to invest in more heavily, invest as much as we possibly can, because there is a direct correlation with the output that we receive.
All right, that's a good question. It's a deep river. You could talk about that all day.
Yeah,
all day. All right, so look, this is something we hear a lot. I'm so confused as to how I should structure my business, trusts, companies, sole traders. It's all very complicated. What are your thoughts on this? Oh, this is hard to give a general. It's hard to give a general recommendation because there's no one correct way of doing this. It really comes down to what you're trying to achieve as an individual, what your strategy is in the short term, the medium term, and in the long term. You really need to decide, what you're doing in business, what you're trying to achieve. And look, it is tough. It is very tough to answer this. You need to get advice around this. If you don't know how to structure your business, you need to speak to someone who can understand your plans and then assist you in structuring the business correctly.
Yeah, ultimately structures are just a way of either giving you flexibility or protection. And it's about understanding your ultimate objective. Typically you don't go into business just to minimize your tax. It's about optimizing your tax, but it's about utilizing business as a vehicle to help you achieve all the things that you want in your life. Structures can have an impact on that, which is important that you do get the right advice. But I typically say you should have the right structures to support who you want to be, not who you are now. So a lot of small businesses go in to start as a sole trader, just see how it goes, and then as it's required, they'll start a business or open a trust or whatever it may be. I say set yourself up for success immediately and rise to the challenge. If you are constantly having that scarcity mindset that you will just kind of adapt as required, then you don't have that sense of urgency to succeed. So that's something that you should consider.
Oh.
We've got some guests. So hopefully that answers your question.
Let's wrap it up early tonight.
We'll wrap it up early. So that's another episode of Ask Aureus Anything, our live Q&A. Any questions that come in on offline, we'll answer them next week. So feel free to jump on and we will catch you same place, same time.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Catch you later.